Man, literally I had no money. So I started my business when I was 40 years old. I sit here today at this interview at 47, and my life has completely changed from 7 years ago. My first stint in real estate was really in the late 2007, 2008. I was working a good sales job at that time, and I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and decided to look into like Peter Conti and some other people that were around during that time. And I started to start some real estate investing, which was wholesaling, but there wasn't a term for it back then. I actually even took a Donald Trump University weekend seminar. So I was trying to do all this stuff, and then the whole world changed, man. You know, for us who are old enough to remember the recession in 2009, 2010, it was bad. And I was one of those people who was affected very, very hard by that recession. And, you know, as a child, my family lost everything through foreclosure. We had our cars repoed, we went through bankruptcy and everything else. And I had a tough upbringing, found myself into success, making good six-figure job, had the white picket fence, the beautiful house. I was living the dream. And all of a sudden, like that, it all started to come to an end and crumbling down around me. I don't have, I'm not a high school graduate. I only have a GED. I don't have any college degree. So, you know, during that time, a lot of people who were highly educated and much more successful on a corporate level were competing for jobs at a lower level where we were all fighting. Because during that time, not only were the housing market a wreck, but we were in a recession and there was no jobs anywhere. And I went from making, you know, six figures to basically being out of work within 2 years. And although we did a big remodel on our house and added an addition and doing all this other stuff, you know, I found myself upside down in my property in a year, about $150,000. And at that time, you know, no loan modifications, there was no refinance options. All the mortgage companies were just selling off as fast as we can. But it was because I started to learn about real estate investing and get into it, which really, because of that market, I didn't know how to really manifest it into doing anything. I was able to save myself from foreclosure and bankruptcy. And one of the cash buyers who's still on our cash buyers list today ended up short selling our house for us. And it was like a saving grace. It gave me a reset button during a really hard time. I was in a depression, couldn't find a job. It was really, really tough. And what that did was, rather than going through the bankruptcy and the foreclosure, I just had a few years of, you know, of a credit hit. But it allowed me to get out of that situation. And he was really nice to be able to like give us money for like a shed, a washer and dryer, and like all these different things. But it was cash we desperately needed at the time for Christmas, clothes, food, you know, our next location. And, you know, my ex-wife and the two kids, we took that money. And because I couldn't find a job, actually, before our house was even sold, I left and went into the military and joined the Air Force and went into basic training just before the age deadline at 34 years old. I was 33 years old and with a bunch of 17-year-old kids because it was the only job I could find at the time. And I was making $36,000 a year in the Air Force. Previous year, 2 years before that, I was making $136,000, right? So my whole world was changed. But that couple things came out of that. One, I realized the power of real estate and how you can help people. Second thing is, everything was out of my control and I hated that feeling. So this was the second time in my life, between my family when I was younger and myself, that situations out of my control put me in a situation where I couldn't provide for myself and my family. And then as I got out of the military and I got myself back into a sales job and started building myself back up to where I needed to be and being a six-figure earner and all that stuff again, as I started approaching 40, I started to realize that a lot of people I knew that were older were starting to be replaceable at an older age in life. So you could be giving yourself 20, 30 years of, or, you know, whatever profession that is, and then overnight you're letting go. You know, companies are selling, they're laying off, and all these people are just like, this is I'm saving for retirement with my 401k, and nothing's coming of it. So it started to make me really nervous. And I said, I need to find a better way. You know, my 401k at the time was not going to be the end all, you know, the be all end all. And I thought, you know, what if my company sells again? What am I going to do? What am I going to do? I can't be in this situation. So I said, I'm going to start my real estate investing. So after a couple years of trying to figure out what I wanted to do, which was always to be a buy and hold landlord, real estate investor, you know, I was like, do I want to flip and everything else? And it wasn't until I came across a podcast that started talking about wholesaling. And it was my coach today and my coach then, for two different reasons, Mr. Tom Kroll out of Florida, a guy who's just tremendous all the way around in his positively impacted my life in ways I can't even begin to describe. But I came across his podcast. It was so full of energy and it was so exciting. And man, I was traveling all over the country with my sales job and I was listening, but I was afraid to pull the trigger because, like everybody else listening to us today, they don't have any money. So like, what do you do, right? You know, I'm divorced now. I travel. I have just enough money to pay my bills at the end of the month. I got 2 kids. But I had to do something. And that's when I decided to sell my house. I made about $17,000 in profit. I owned the house for 2 years and I paid off like $5,000, $6,000 in credit card debt. I paid $5,000 for the coaching and I paid $6,000 to start my business like I spoke about earlier, which basically gave me my initial marketing budget, gave me my contracts, my attorney fees, setting up my LLC. And then his coaching taught me how to wholesale my first house in 90 days, which I did. And we started January 2017. I got my first assignment check starting out as a wholesaler in March of 2017 for a whopping $5,000. So I was getting there. And then, you know, the coaching program wasn't really, you know, taught to teach you how to rinse and repeat, just kind of taught you how to do it. So, you know, at that point, my girlfriend at the time, Shelly, was, you know, we're both working full-time jobs. We just scratched and clawed. And at that time, you know, we were deciding to blend our 2 families together. She was going through the end of her divorce, or she was just coming out of a divorce. I was out of my divorce. We had 5 kids we were blending. I was working full-time traveling the country. She was working a full-time job. We had no money except for the $5,000 that came in that fed the next marketing. Then we got a $3,000 check and we fumbled our way through 10 deals in our first year for $77,000. And then at the end of that first year, I convinced her to quit her job because I needed some help. And it was a struggle bus for a year 2. You know, I guess to answer your question in a very long-winded way, you know, if there's a will, there's a way. And a lot of people can make excuses, and I had all the excuses, but we said, no way, we're in it, we're gonna see it through. And since then, we've gone on to do over 400 houses. My $11,000 investment, because of all the hard work and the grit and not making excuses and just overcoming all those difficult times, which still happen today, we've gone on to do over $8 million in gross profit since.